Right, guys, welcome back to another episode of Crossing Swords. As always, I'm Andrew.
And I'm heartbroken that we have to record this. Obviously, we don't have to record this. We could choose not to, but I think we were always going to cover it.
Yeah, we like covering current events in general and anything we feel is wrong out there. And I think this definitely comes under that category. We've covered it slightly in a previous episode. But
I think as lefty snowflakes, often we think a lot of things out there are wrong. And some people disagree. Some people are prepared to put up a fight. On this one, I think it's pretty universal. I think there's really only one man and a few TV watchers that would disagree that this is wrong.
Yeah, I've not really heard anyone being pro-Russia in the current situation, I have to admit.
No.
I mean, even Roman Abramovich is seeming pro-Ukraine.
Although he didn't condemn the acts or the war in his statement.
No, but he's whatever money he gets from the sale of Chelsea is all.
Well, no, but see, this is such a grey area. So he said any profits from the sale.
Yeah.
How do you determine profits? What? So he's saying he bought the club for whatever the value of a Premier League, whatever the value of a mid-table Premier League club was in 2004, and whatever he sells the value of a winning team in 2022.
I mean,
what, he's going to put all that money in, or is he going to decide, actually, I paid for the academy, I paid for this, I paid for that, I paid for this?
Yeah, I mean, in theory, if you're looking, I think it's perhaps...
I think it's a really grey area.
A poor choice of words.
Yeah, I don't like it.
No, but I
don't
took
like
it as the money he'll get from the sale is going to go to charity rather than in his pocket. That's how I chose to take it. Maybe I'm being naive. But we're not here just to discuss Roman Abramovich.
Nope, and I've been keeping notes. Look how long this list is.
Jesus. I mean, I wrote a few notes, to be fair.
It goes.
Nice. Well, what do you want to start us off with? What part of it?
Well, first of all, I want to preface this whole episode by saying that there's every chance that we're going to make jokes throughout and make fun throughout. But I just want to be very clear. We absolutely condemn what is happening right now.
I couldn't agree more.
We hope that, we'll get on to what we hope for, but we really hope that Putin comes to his senses and senses the long-running downfall of himself in it.
Yeah.
And stops sooner rather than later and saves lives and saves the damage. Not just the Ukrainian lives, but obviously there's the sanctions that are taking place from a lot of places in Russia that are going to do damage for Russian people as well. But particularly the immediate danger.
Yeah.
And obviously the developments, as we're recording on the Friday, the developments today that they attacked and seized the largest nuclear power plant in Europe.
Yeah.
And thanks to their shelling, there was a fire. Thankfully put out and under control. But, I mean,
it could
the
have been
fucking
a
catastrophic damage of...
Yeah, it could have wiped out a lot of people.
Yeah. And I think...
No, I couldn't agree more. I think it's a desperately sad situation. And one of the things we do here at Crossing Swords is we like to not make light, but bring a bit of levity to serious situations.
We approach everything with humour.
And yeah, that's exactly right. We approach everything in humour. And that includes in our own lives. There's nothing sacred usually for us in terms of... So when we do make light of things or bring a bit of levity, as I say, it's not out of disrespect or not caring about the situation. It couldn't be further from the truth. It's just how we process these sort of events.
No, and there's a lot to cover. So if I may dive in somewhat at the start and say, let's take it back to just before the war.
Yeah.
And the invasion. The anti-Ukrainian rhetoric and memes on social media. Now, Russia are one of the greatest seizers of the power of social media. And I think it's safe to say that they're one of the best countries at utilising social media, both at home and in foreign policy and in foreign affairs.
I think that's fairly well established
and influencing.
Now, isn't it?
And I think a lot of countries are a long way behind, but they were really out on the forefront. And so... it's interesting that there was a spike in social media usage and sharing of anti-Ukrainian rhetoric and memes in 2014, just before they annexed Crimea.
Okay.
And then again at the end of 2021 and into the start of January of 2022,
So in the run up to
there was
this
another
invasion.
spike. So
Yeah.
as much as people might not have seen a full-blown invasion of Ukraine going on, it was very clear that something was in the offing.
And I feel this is sort of a question coming from what you're saying in terms of when these things come around, the Russians go heavy on propaganda,
Yeah.
on pro-Russian everything. And also I've seen recently that when Russia are doing well in a conflict, it doesn't matter whether it's justified or not, the swell of support for Putin and his regime goes quite large in Russia.
Well, if I may,
Yeah, please
I
do.
mentioned earlier in a different podcast when we were talking about Boris Johnson,
Yeah.
and I said that my belief was he stumbled into something that works.
Okay.
And he just kept doing it. And when we were talking about how he went from being a journalist to the prime minister through mayor or through a mayorship, whatever the phrasing is, and I think he just stumbled on something he did. And now, interesting, Putin, where in 1999, when he just before he took over, so he was elected essentially in like 2000.
Okay.
In 1999, he was polling at 2%.
Okay.
So 2% of the nation.
Yeah, I think I've seen this.
And what he did was he placed himself into. I mean, he was obviously quite high ranking in the KGB in the Soviet Union before the collapse of the Soviet Union.
KGB.
And so obviously with the collapse of the Soviet Union, and so he was well positioned. He led the military action against the Chechen revolt.
Okay.
And he actually went as far as it's quite shocking. But my point is after that in 2000 when he won 50, he got 53%. So he's gone from 2% to 53%, and it was all because the strong image of a strong winning military leader, because he wasn't known for. When he wasn't known, and if he was known, it was like, oh, he's the security guy, he's the intelligence guy, he's not really a leader.
Yeah.
In September 22nd, actually, this was really interesting, in 1999, men were seen dropping sugar bags into a building that turned out to contain hexagon and detonators. MVD police then arrested the men who were actually FSB police. And Putin then announced that it was all a training deal to see how quickly they could respond to it, and that don't worry about it, actually is sugar. But there was a lot of attacks that were like the Chechens, and it's like,
and they were sort of politically well timed.
Yeah,
because I've heard that as well. But my question was going to be: are the Russian people? What level of responsibility do they have for the situation they're in and the regime they're under? Because, like I said, when he is successful militarily, the support for him does grow. Now, I know that's a tale as old as time. That's always been a good way to appease people, is by having a military campaign that goes well and it's all glorious. But
that was it. His military his polling was waning in 2014, just before the annexation of Crimea.
Yeah, so I think you're right in the point you're making, that he stumbled upon this thing of, if all else fails, go to war, do something good, or at least it appears good, and I'll get a bit more support.
In answer to your question, I don't. First of all, huge commendations to the Russian people, who there are currently over, I believe the number sits somewhere around the 9,000 mark and climbing, people who have been arrested for anti-war protests, including, by the way, school children. Yeah. Like there's images of school children in prison
getting arrested
because they went to the Ukrainian embassy with peace signs and symbols and stuff, and they had no to war symbols with them, signage with them. Yeah. Now, this is just an absolute side note, but just for the record, currently stands 8 years is the maximum sentence for protests in Russia. Wow. In the UK, under the new policing bill, it will be 10. Just to throw that out there, just complete side note.
No.
Yep.
Putin's got a more progressive protesting regime than our country now has. But it's funny, I keep seeing these things online of like, while you're focusing on this is what our government's currently doing. And it is quite frightening.
But I think there's a responsibility, I think there's a responsibility from the people around Putin, even just to sense their own political. So the general consensus and the prevailing thing is, as you can see from the Russian kickback,
Yeah.
this is not good.
No.
Combined with the sanctions that are being placed on Russia and on Russian banks,
Yeah.
Putin will not come out of this well.
No, I mean, apparently, from what I've been watching and reading, he expected to have won by now and it'd be done.
Anywhere between 2 to 4 days, I'm reading the reports that he thought.
He also saved up a literal war chest. I mean, do you remember in the papers we used to hear, like, the new Blackburn owners, Venkies, have given Sam Allardyce a 40 million war chest, but, like, this is a literal war chest of over 600 billion. And he genuinely thought it would be all right because the West had never done what they've done since, which is sanction the centralised Russian banks.
No, what we do is we tell them off. We go, oh, don't do that.
Oh, yes, that's naughty. For once, we've actually done it. So he's lost over half of the money he set aside.
You say we've done it. The EU have done it.
Yeah.
Switzerland have done it. Some of the neutral countries
like
really
sad.
Germany and
I can't call
Finland,
us part of all of that.
have imposed sanctions. Now I've got to read you these numbers.
Okay, go for it.
I've got to read you these numbers. Okay, so there were, by EU countries, there were 446 sanctions imposed. That is to say, asset seized and oligarchs put, all their assets taken and put on a watch list, and their money is being frozen and tracked and whatever. 446 by EU countries, 351 by Switzerland. And by the way, in like France, they were like seizing yachts. They were just there and then they were just taking them.
To get involved with these things, they're normally a safe haven.
America, 148 sanctions imposed and
wow,
people placed on watch list. In the UK, 24. And they have a 30-day notice before the sanctions kick in.
The US actually introduced the Magnitsky Act, which was the first of its kind to go after oligarchs.
And but the UK, 24, and there's a 30-day warning on it. So everyone else is doing right now. We're seizing stuff. We're freezing stuff. I mean, that is why Roman Abramovich is selling his properties and he's selling his because he's got a month. All his stuff's going to get seized in a month, and it's like bollocks to that. Take it now.
Yeah.
Take it now.
Yeah. I mean, we can get into, and I mean, Sir Keir Starmer's calling for, in the coming week, they want to suggest even more sanctions and measures to go after the oligarchs sooner rather than giving them a month. And Boris Johnson sort of refused to agree to the fact he was going to do that and just sort of repeated what we've already done and what has been done.
The Conservative Party, 2 days before the war, took an £80,000 donation from an oligarch with strong Putin links.
There's also this guy, I don't know if you've heard of him. Is it Lebedev?
Lebedev, the foreign minister, whatever.
No. He's a Russian oligarch's son. He currently
owns Lord. He's in the House of Lords.
He's about to be inducted into Lords in the next month.
Yes,
and
I do
him
know.
And Boris have been friends for, I think they said, over 7 years now.
Yeah.
And he's the son of I believe he's passed away now. His father was a member of the
high-ranking KGB
and
officer,
also an oligarch. So this is a sort of, and he's been at his house. They've been at parties together. They've been seen publicly multiple times.
I think it's a good idea to say this. I don't know how, just for the sake of covering all bases. For those wondering what, you'll have heard oligarchs mentioned a lot. And someone at work recently said to me, so, I've never heard that before. And I'm like, really? But whatever, so we'll go with it. An oligarch is basically someone who has power and influence because they have money. And generally speaking, because of the sort of the communist setup of Russia, you're not going to find people who like in England, where they come through because they've got familial ties and they've got old money and family money. It's new money. It's people who were around at the right place at the right time, who rose high through, like people who rose high through the rank of the KGB and then were given, gifts and positions
or they took it by force,
shares in companies,
or through corruption, or there's a lot of dodgy shit that goes on in the Russian financial system.
Is whether it's at home or abroad, they have huge power on the political governing bodies because they've got money, basically.
Yeah, and for example, one of the ways a lot of people made their money, and allegedly Roman Abramovich did this, he was a KGB soldier who had men under his command and would force people to sell him their shares in oil companies and gas companies at a massively reduced rate, and then once the stock market rose again in Russia, that's how they made their money, was having shares in things that they just stole off of other people.
Yeah, it's. But I just wanted to cover that, just because I think there's a lot of
No,
people.
absolutely. I mean, one thing I'd recommend people, if they enjoy reading, or he's even been interviewed by James O'Brien, it's on his old podcast, Unfiltered, I believe. It's a guy called, the book's called Red Notice. The guy's name's escaping me at the moment. And he tells the story about how the Magnitsky Act was created and came about, and it's all to do with his story and his lawyer. So it's very fascinating to listen to, and you'll hear a lot more about Putin and Russia in that as well.
Yeah, I mean, also it's important to point out that the world is watching on this one, because China, for example, have been like openly talking about invading Taiwan for a while now.
Well, they've already seized control of it anyway, haven't they?
But they've been doing Taiwan. If you've been watching the news at all for the last like 3 or 4 years, Taiwan have been making a lot of noise to the West in particular, saying, and to the UN, saying every like month or so they're going, China are doing military training exercises in our air, in our sea, in our land. They're like, fucking ain't right. Like, they're fucking gearing up to take over, man. They so want to take over. And China, so the Chinese foreign minister came out this week and basically didn't condemn it, didn't call it a war.
No, but they've basically seized control of Taiwan. They basically decided they went back to an old royal claim on Taiwan.
Yeah, I mean, that's their thing. They want...
Yeah.
And it's
but currently the government of Taiwan serve government in India. They're not even in their own country.
No, but it's and it's not, you know... But there's been some incredible stuff to come out of this.
I mean, there's been some real heroic stories. I mean, I saw one the other day of just a regular Ukrainian man taking a mine from under a bridge
with the fag in his mouth. I love that clip. I love that clip.
That's what you'd love. You'd imagine a British meme, wouldn't it, of someone just running on with a mine.
There's been obviously Vladimir Klitschko, who is the mayor of Kiev.
Yeah.
Stayed behind the fight. He's a millionaire
so is his
boxer.
brother Vitaly, hasn't he?
Yeah, and also you've got obviously the hero, everyone's crush celebrity maybe. Zelensky. Zelensky, the
the Ukrainian president.
Who's essentially like having Nish Kumar in charge.
He's avoided being assassinated 3 times this week.
Really?
Yeah. I read that earlier. There's been 3 attempts on his life this week that he's managed to avoid.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, just to put it into context, it is like having Nish Kumar elected as Prime Minister and then being suddenly invaded by Scotland. Only Scotland have the military power of Russia.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know what... Yeah. I mean, what I find fascinating, I mean, if it's true, what we were talking about before, I mean, I put that basically Russia wanted Ukraine as part of a sort of Eurasian single market, and now that it seems like Ukraine are applying to be a part of the EU, or certainly making noises of it.
They have actually officially done a last minute, like an emergency access application this last week.
I mean, I haven't read up on that part, but say that got put through on emergency basis, would that mean the EU have to back them militarily, or
depends on part of their thing? I don't know,
because I'm not sure whether we have
the NATO Security Council really that's the one.
Yeah, but obviously they even if they joined the EU, they wouldn't be a part of NATO, would they? It's a separate entity.
A separate thing. And I don't know what I was saying, but who knows?
You were talking about the Ukrainian president.
Yeah, no, I can't remember what I was saying about him though.
That's fair.
I mean, there's so much to cover and so much has happened.
One of the things I wanted to talk about was the refugee situation, because it's another part of this where we are massively underwhelming in comparison to everyone else. I was listening to it about it last night. Basically, we've changed nothing. We've said publicly that we might waive some restrictions on some family visas for Ukrainians,
but we haven't.
But we haven't actually done it. And not most, but other nations have done things like created an emergency humanitarian visa.
Well, the Irish
and things like this.
The Irish foreign minister came out this last week and said we're waiving all
Unrestricted,
visas, completely unrestricted. Anyone,
send as many
anyone
as you
from
want.
Ukraine with you, you know, who's Ukrainian or in Ukraine,
Yeah.
come.
Yeah.
The EU have recently passed this week that they're waiving visas for
And then
people.
there's us.
I think they're doing it on a 2-year emergency. They're doing it on a 2-year deal, so anyone can come and stay for 2 years, and then they'll reassess it, kind of thing. And then there's us who literally said, and I'm not joking, I think it was Boris Johnson turned around and said that they could perhaps apply for work visas. I mean, how insulting.
It sounds about right for good old Boris.
So far behind, man.
It is, but I mean, not in their defence, but, you know, a point for them is they're being consistent.
Yeah. I mean, one of my favourites.
They don't want people coming in.
One of my favourite clips this week, I saw it yesterday, or it might be the day before, was in Germany, in Berlin. And there was hordes of people waiting behind the barriers, sort of like you would at like Heathrow or something at the airport, waiting for the arrivals. And all these Ukrainian refugees coming in off the train. Yeah. And there was a woman with a bullhorn. I'm like getting like goosebumps remembering it, like genuinely, like woman with a bullhorn. And she's saying, you know, bringing the refugees down, sort of like one woman, 3 kids, speaks French, who can help? And everyone there are people living in Berlin or in the greater Berlin area, you know, in that part of Germany. And they're offering their homes to these people. And it's just this clip of this woman, one woman, 3 kids, speaks French, and a woman steps forward and says, yeah, I can take them, and off they go. And it's like, I'm genuinely like getting emotional because it's like such a fucking beautiful thing.
It's one of the...
and it kind of... So it made me so like, you know, whenever there's a disaster and a humanitarian disaster and a crisis, it does bring out these wonderful acts of humanity in response to it. And yet we're being denied that in the UK because we're not willing to...
That's what I'd ask you, because...
It all made me angry at the same time.
If we're being honest, the way our country has behaved, at least electorally, by electing a Tory government for as long as we have, by voting Brexit, the message we're very much putting out there is people from outside of the UK aren't welcome.
I know, and it's such a daft message.
So
because
my question would be, do you actually think that's how we feel as a country? Or, like, do you think it would be like that if we had refugees come over, that you'd get these swaths of people?
I think it's the same as it's similar to the thing, you know, that Russians have been subject to the last few years. I think it's propaganda. I think people believe it because that's what they're told to believe. But I think they don't really know about it. When you dig into it and you actually ask them, rather than using like key trigger words like refugees and immigration, whatever, when you actually park those phrases and you dig into the issues, I don't think people do believe it. That's a very good point.
I reckon if you went to an average person and said, how would you feel about some more refugees coming here? And they went, absolutely not. And then went to them, how would you feel about the Ukrainians coming here? They'd probably go, that's probably all right. You're asking them the exact same question.
Or if you did it on a county basis rather than on a country basis, and you went, imagine, you know, and you go, imagine if there was a
far more accurate,
you know, you're in Yorkshire, for example, you go, imagine if there was a war kicking off in London.
Yeah.
And there were a bunch of Londoners who wanted to come up. They'd probably open their doors and say, yeah, of course. Like, it's you know, I just think once you get to it's like the whole, and I'm not going to get into it. I know we've said there's a whole episode in this, but the woke thing.
Yeah.
People are, there's a whole movement out there, it's like anti-woke. But when you actually use the definition of woke and ask them, okay, but so you're against people being, and they can't answer it. And when you actually break it down, you go, oh, so you're against people being like aware of injustice and aware of the wall being pulled over their eyes by the powers that be. And they go, no, I'm not against that. And you're like, well, then
I think what that is people in some way think they're missing out by not being allowed to say something that, if you're being honest, you know is not a nice thing to say.
I think it's propaganda. I think it's... And you put propaganda out... Look, I think if you put propaganda out in the way that we have, I think it hits about a 50% mark. I think about half the people in the country buy into it. Well, no, in fact, I think it's probably about a third. I think it's about a third of the people buy into it. About a fifth or so were already on board with it. They already had these kind of far views. And then about half the country just don't buy into it. They're like, no, you're being stupid. And I think that's what we're seeing in Russia. I think with the Ukrainian war, I think you're seeing there's a small percentage that will have already been all for it, because that's the thing about Putin. That's what I was going to say, is that he's really old school Soviet in that the Soviet Union should be the Soviet Union, this Russian empire. And not that dissimilar to us in Britain. It's like, we're Great Britain, though, we should be. But it's a very much like a territorial thing. And so obviously he works very closely with Belarus. He's not that bothered with Lukashenko and being like, we need to take, it's like, they're already as, don't worry about that.
Yeah.
And he puts that to the state media, and you see, and this is the thing, the message that goes into Russians, they get sold to them, is that the Ukrainians are Nazis.
Yeah.
This is a very common thing, that they're Nazis, that they're whores. They get called whores because they're whoring themselves out to the rest of the Europe. And they're like, it's sort of like an abusive relationship. It's like,
your soul to the evil West.
We made you, you're nothing without us, and now you're going off flaunting it about to everyone else. It's like, you fucking whore or whatever. And that comes out a lot. And the Nazi thing makes me laugh because, well, not laugh, but, Vladimir Zelensky is the grandson of Jewish grandparents who were a part of the Holocaust, victims of the Holocaust.
Yeah.
You're like, it's like the least fucking. I know, obviously, that was them, and this is him, and he could do a complete 180 and be like, do you know what?
The
Fuck the
really sad
Jews.
thing is,
But
those sort of truths
on.
become irrelevant in today's society, don't they? When the narrative is being sold as such, you see it constantly. We saw it under Trump. We see it with our own government.
Well, speaking of Trump,
where we just go, oh no, just ignore that. That doesn't exist.
Speaking of Trump, Trump's come out and basically said it's a good move for them.
What, for Russia?
Yeah, let me get this. I've got to search it up, but so actually, Fox News was actually supporting Putin.
Okay.
Tucker Carlson, who is a big, are you aware?
Yeah.
He said, this is an interesting thing. So he said that hating Putin has become the main part of foreign policy.
Okay.
In America. But should we all fall for that? And this is what he said, and this is just like fucking scary. He said, has Putin ever called me a racist? Has Putin ever threatened to get me fired for disagreeing with him? Has Putin shipped every middle-class job in my town to Russia? Has Putin manufactured a worldwide pandemic that wrecked my business and kept me indoors for 2 years? Is Putin teaching my children to embrace racial discrimination? Is he trying to snuff out Christianity? Does he eat dogs? Which I thought was a great left field question thrown in, by the way.
Does he eat dogs?
He's
always got to have a dig at China, hasn't he?
And this is the thing. This is the thing. So he's like, and when you read the first part of that, we mentioned woke. That's essentially the woke thing, right? That's anti-woke. He's like, has Putin ever called me a racist? It's like, right, so you're angry at the left because they've called you a racist because you're a racist. Has have they ever threatened to get me fired for disagreeing with them? They're not threatening to get you fired for disagreeing with them. They're threatening to get you fired because you're promoting racist agendas.
Yeah.
But, does eat dogs. He said, these are fair questions, and the answer to all of them is no.
Donald Trump's eating a dog. I've no doubt in my mind.
Yeah, you may well have. I'm not. Someone paid him enough. Interestingly, the long-term effects. I've just come across a stat here that because this is that I said about China not condemning it. Wang Wenbin, who's a spokesperson for the Chinese Communist Party, said that China respected the territorial integrity of all countries, but understands Russia's legitimate security concerns. There are no security concerns.
Well,
it's a
that's
fucking
one
invasion.
dictatorship tipping its hat to another, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
like, don't question what they're doing too much, because then you might start questioning what we're doing over here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of over here, we have 2,300 Russians in elite private schools.
We also have a huge percentage. Like, I was listening to something yesterday, and they were saying like there's a massive percentage of our foreign-owned property in London is Russian-owned.
Yeah.
And there's a large percentage where we don't know who owns it, but we're pretty sure most of that percentage is Russian. And they buy shit like they were talking about one oligarch that had bought a £60 million home in London and a tube station that was no longer in service. I mean, how much clearer could the money laundering be? To just
it's pretty bait, isn't it?
Yeah, like it blows my mind. And I mean, part of me wants. I tried to think of a justification as to why our government would be so hesitant to back something that, like, he's got Keir Starmer literally going, look, mate, you've got my support if you want to do this. And he still won't.
I mean, what made me laugh about our government
it can't be anything other than we're too reliant on Russian money.
Well, yes. So the other thing that made me laugh about our government is they were asking footballers to boycott the Champions League final, which was being held in St.
Yeah, it's now in
Petersburg.
Paris,
It's
isn't it?
moved. They were asking, and a lot of Formula One drivers, by the way, it's now been removed, the Russian Grand Prix. But
Yeah.
like Vettel and Hamilton, that came out and said, like, I'm just not going to race there.
Mm.
But our government asking footballers to boycott the Champions League final when actually a year ago they were being told to stay out of politics.
Yeah.
When they were trying to feed our children, and you know, take a stand against
Yeah,
racism.
but now they should get involved.
But now they should get involved, and they've really crossed the line. I saw a great quote, and I'd be remiss if I didn't get this in. I realised that I probably won't get a lot of my notes in, but I'd be
That's
remiss if I
absolutely
didn't get this quote in. It said, "The shame of these events is that they are entirely precedented."
Yeah, I mean, we knew this was coming. Sadly, it was very widely reported that it was coming.
According to, here's one I want to ask you. So, according to some Russian MPs, they said that this has been on the table for up to a year, maybe more.
Yeah,
Now-
probably in his private circle longer.
Well, now this is what I want to ask you. These are the Russian MPs. They're not necessarily that close to Putin.
No.
Do you think genuinely that it's been on the cards for a year and that it's been talked about for a year, or do you think that's them now trying to claw back some kind of?
I don't think this was a spur of the moment.
Well, no. What I was
choice.
going to say, well, no, it's definitely the fact that they were on the verge of joining NATO, and
Yeah,
and Russia was like, it's now or never.
forced. Yeah,
But no, but I think is that kind of, are they just, has it been on the cards for that long, in talked about in Parliament and stuff, or are they saying that because Putin's done a madman job, he wields all the power, and they're trying to claw back an image of control, and they've been like, yeah, we knew about it, it was going on for...
I mean, they must, if that's true, they must be incredibly deluded to think that anyone looks at a Russian politician and thinks they have any legitimacy whatsoever.
But no, but do you know, like...
so for them, like, I mean, I imagine... to be honest, I'm shocked. I would have been shocked if Putin had told them the day before. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I mean, his
They might
table,
have found
by
out
way.
with
Can
the
we
rest
talk
of
about
us.
His table?
His table? Oh, the really long table.
The really long table?
Yeah, he sat with Boris, wasn't it?
And he sat with his own fucking generals on one end of it.
It looks really awkward. I mean, that is overcompensating.
Also,
isn't it?
his
It is,
little-
look at my wood.
His little desk, great phrasing, by the way, love that. His little
Thank you.
desk when he delivered the speeches from, and everyone was like, oh, he's wearing the same tie, it's the same clip report, he's just recorded a bunch of clips on the same day, he's clearly like, whatever. But his little desk looks like something out of a fucking brochure from the 1980s. Like, that technology
really
is
notice
so
the desk, to be honest.
dated. Like, the video
Yeah,
phone.
but Russia's dated.
and-
They're like...
But I know, but bro, like, this is ridiculous.
I mean, we don't know how far
like
back the
fucking
story of that desk goes. We don't know
Amstrad
who sat
computers
it.
in the back, and like, do you know what I mean? Just ridiculously outdated.
He's got the Apple One in the corner.
I mean, and that's like, all his friends are really jealous because that's like the height of technology.
he's
They're like,
finally got the Apple One."
fucking boy, look at this.
Yeah,
Look,
absolutely.
look at the floppy disks.
No,
Amazing.
to be honest, I would have said his inner circle definitely knew a year ago, if not longer from that. But as to whether their parliament knew or their MPs knew, I mean, it's impossible to say. I mean, yeah, maybe it is them trying to claw back a bit of like
Yeah.
face and legitimacy, but I mean, at this point,
I mean, like, the thing that when you're on the wrong side of history, and I know I've said a couple of times, if Nigel Farage is on your side, you're on the wrong side of history. Like,
Yeah.
the fucking Taliban have called for Russia to show some restraint,
have
bro.
they actually?
The actual Taliban
Jeez.
have asked for some restraint.
Wow. Yeah, when the Taliban have turned against you,
I
for
feel
your
like
actions,
maybe you need
you've
to
taken a
you
wrong
need-
turn. Yeah.
You need to stop and think about
Like,
this.
could you imagine if they addressed us? These men at Crossing Swords, they blaspheme. We're not happy. They take things too far. I'd be like, well, all right, maybe it's time we stop doing
Yeah,
this.
I'd be like,
Jay.
do you know what?
Like,
Okay.
I've definitely gone down a bad path here. The Taliban is calling for us to be cancelled. Do you know what I mean?
I mean, like, yeah, when the Taliban are against you, you've done something a little bit wrong. Huge respect, by the way, to the because I've got this on the Friday. The reports that they're alive, but the 13 guards on the island.
Yeah, because they said they got executed, didn't they?
Well, they said they got bombarded with fucking fire,
okay.
and they just got decimated.
Maybe
But
they went
turns
under
out
a
now they
bunker or
were.
something.
Yeah, it turns out now they're alive and being taken prisoner.
Weren't these the guys that just told them to fuck
The
off?
warship asked them to surrender, Russian warship, and they said, go and fuck yourselves. And then sort of said, oh, well, this is it, and sort of prepared for the end.
Yeah, and they took the beating better than Daniel Craig.
They took it really well. On that same Friday,
he should have just got in a bunker, man.
Putin addressed the Russians, Ukrainians,
Spoiler alert.
asking them to turn against their neo-Nazi Banderite leaders. We have more chance of getting an agreement with them than we do with that gang of drug addicts and neo-Nazis in Kiev. Also then claimed that the Ukrainians are using women and children as human shields when actually Russians are being thought to fire on civilians.
What they say to the Russians is one thing, but I mean I've seen
That's
just on Twitter that isn't the case. The Ukrainians are doing everything humanly possible to get their women and children to safety.
And you talk about humanly possible. Can we talk about the fact that a lot of the Russian troops are conscripts, that are young men?
I didn't know that.
That are being, and even in Russian law, by the way, you're not meant to send a conscript onto foreign soil.
I mean,
in active duty.
That would tell you probably why they're
the
not
youngest
doing
of the
as
young,
well, isn't it?
And the ones sort of like on and around the front lines, they were being told it was exercises.
Really?
They were not being told that it was a war or an invasion or a military operation. They were being told that it was exercises.
So they're getting marched into Ukraine and they're like, "Oh, hi guys."
I know you're looking at that plane thinking that's quite dumb. But interestingly, where Ukrainians were capturing them,
but are you sure, guys? Like you've given me a live gun here.
Like what they would.
There's a tank there. There's bombers. We've just blown up that building.
Like what they were
that
doing
car,
is
that family. This doesn't feel like an accident.
They were taking these young Russian men and they were feeding them because the Russians are raiding homes in the towns that they're in because they don't have enough food or fuel or cigarettes. That was the one thing they were looking for. That was I was like fucking brilliant. It might as well be searching for vodka. Really round out the stereotype.
War, I think quitting fax would go out the window.
You probably you know that old.
I'd be like
that old stereotyping moves would be like, this was the wrong day to quit. Yeah. Like, you'd probably be one of them.
Like, the minute I saw the first bomb drop, I'd be like, Mum, I'm going round to Pino's.
But speaking about...
Getting a pack of Sterling.
I think it's the best day Londis has ever done. It's the best. Spas everywhere are just making money the day before war.
Yeah, sorry, guys. Pino's is a Londis that's round the corner from my house. And the guy that used to own it, he doesn't even own it anymore.
Was called Pino.
So I called it It was just Pino's. I still call it
Pino's.
Pino.
But yeah,
to be honest, people kept thinking I was chanting something else, so I just stopped. and he's an upstanding citizen.
But they were allowing, they were helping the young Russian men call their parents to let them know they're okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that you mentioned that they're young conscripts, because I saw an image of a Russian soldier that had been captured, and he looked about 14, and I thought he looks far too young to be on the front lines.
And in one of the southern cities, in a city between Crimea and Kiev, one of them was captured. He was fed, he was clothed, and they gave him a phone to call his mum and tell him that he was all right.
That's nice.
And it's like, that's how humanity wins. Right.
Well, what that shows is that despite what Russia's done, the Ukrainians aren't going to sink to their level.
No, a lot of Russian people are against it. Like I said, a lot have been arrested.
One of the questions I wanted to ask you while it's in my head, I don't know if you watched PMQs. I just sort of watched the highlights. I watched the direct sort of back and forth between Keir Starmer and Boris. But as I said previously, Keir Starmer's obviously... He wasn't quite criticising Boris. He was pointing out that he felt they could do more and recommended ways to do more, and then even said, I'm giving you an open invitation. We can get this through very quickly and do some good together. Yeah. Do you feel that's the right thing to do in this situation, or do you think he should just bombard Boris still?
I think it's a really interesting approach, because I do believe that he should be bombarding Boris, because now he's got the fuel to say, he can essentially Churchill himself. He can say, look, we're prepared to help the government do everything we can. Why is the government giving them 30 days to get all their money out?
Well, do you reckon that'll be the next step? So he's done the, we'll do whatever you want to do. We'll get this through.
No, I think you've got to turn it. I think you've got to show yourself as the leader and show Boris as flagging. So if I was Sir Keir, I'd essentially be using every PMQs and every opportunity to say, look, that Labour supports the strongest action against...
Well, this is the thing.
And then you can think of whatever scenarios it is in your head, right? Whether that's full-on military support or whether that's just, immediate sanctions. I'd be saying, Labour support these moves. Labour want these moves. The Prime Minister is dithering. The Prime Minister is giving them days to get their money out. The Prime Minister has his hands washed in his money.
I think
We are willing to work with the Prime Minister.
I think
I wouldn't allude. I'd attack.
No, I think
would.
in my head, what I think he's doing, and I'm not necessarily saying it's the right way of doing things. I think he's trying to show, because the likelihood is, by the time the next election rolls around, if Boris has survived up until that point, which, probably being honest, based off of what he's survived so far, I can't imagine it anything bad happening to him between now and then that forces him to resign. So I think if Labour were to be in power again, it's probably not going to be as a majority government. It's very likely going to be in tandem with someone else. So part of me thinks it's him knowing he needs to be seen as someone who can work with others.
Possibly. I'll tell you what and
I think it's also him setting up so that if by next PMQs, Boris hasn't come to him and hasn't, because what he was doing, he was directly outlining, I want to do this, this and this will do this. You have my full support to get that done. So it's him saying, these are my ideas.
Well, that's the thing I think that probably is the problem for Keir is he's very good at attacking Boris Johnson, saying this man is not fit to be Prime Minister. This Tory government is not fit to be the Prime Minister. But at no point does he offer an alternative by saying, at the same time, I am fit to be Prime Minister. We are fit to be.
Yeah, he definitely
I don't think he doesn't go far enough
about himself.
And I think this is another opportunity, and I don't want to use the Ukrainian war and invasion as political point scoring or a political
but it's a very good opportunity for him to show what sort of leader he would be.
He can do that. He can now simultaneously say, you are not fit to be Prime Minister.
Yeah.
I am a leader.
This is what I want to do.
I will get this done. I will get that. I will take this action on Ukraine, and I will help them in this way and that way and this way, and I will condemn Russia, and I will look for the future. And
I definitely agree with you that he's not someone, he doesn't self-aggrandise enough, and I know it's something we dislike about Boris, but we've both also agreed we basically need a left version of Boris for Labour to be successful again. Yeah,
absolutely. And I just want to say that, speaking of sort of Boris and the right in the UK, Nigel Farage was on CNBC in America saying that NATO promised the EU, and the EU promised that they would not extend invitations to the East, to the countries in the East and the former Soviet Union, and that they've sought to extend further and further, which is not true, by the way. They never extended out. Countries asked to join them when they saw the success of the Union.
Yeah.
But but Nigel Farage is saying that it's basically NATO's fault and the EU's fault for expanding out when they promised they wouldn't. And it's like, what a load of horseshit. Once again, if Nigel Farage is on your side,
the worrying thing is that people will listen to what he's saying still, won't there? There is still probably some saddos out there that see Nigel Farage as a legitimate source of the political pulse, I guess.
Yeah, and by the way, I meant to say earlier when I was talking about the EU and the fact they've waived visas, they've actually gone one step further. They announced on Tuesday that they would allow Ukrainians in all EU countries access to schools, medical facilities,
that's fantastic,
and all that kind of stuff. I mean, it's no good just letting them in. It's like,
to be honest, the only silver lining to how shit our country is that there's enough out there that aren't.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And that it's desperately sad to live in a country that can do a lot more than it does and just chooses not to for no real good reason.
Yeah.
And to have a government that is only doing those things because it believes it's pandering to something and a need and want in our people.
Yeah. And meanwhile, Boris is over here saying that we're leading the way on sanctions. We're leading Europe on sanctions and stuff. And it's just so plainly not true. Everything.
I also read something. Now, it's obviously, it's not as sort of like stringent as it sounds, but like apparently when like Ukraine were developing nuclear weapons at one point, and us, Russia, and the EU, or some of the big nations in the EU, like Germany and France, negotiated a proliferation with Ukraine where they agreed to stop developing those weapons, and in return were guaranteed safety by two nations, and us, Germany and France, all said that we would support them. The two nations that swore to defend them were the USA and Russia. And it was an agreement put in place in case you were ever left vulnerable because you weren't developing nuclear weapons anymore. And we haven't fulfilled that.
No, obviously not. In fact, we've made the nuclear situation worse. when Russia put their nuclear, warheads on special alert, I think is the phrase. And it was quite comical. I mean, if it wasn't so world-threatening.
Well, it is comical in the sense as no one's flexing their muscles.
Well, no, it's comical.
We're nowhere near.
It's comical in the sense that he turned around and said, when asked what brought about that change, and the foreign minister said, well, he said, I'm not going to name names, but it was the UK Foreign Secretary. That's quite a funny way to deliver it. I mean, it's a horrible thing to deliver, but that's credit where it's due. That's a pretty funny way to deliver it. And it's basically, the speculation is that it's when Liz Truss went on TV and said she encourages and supports any Brits who want to fly out and join the fight. And it was like, okay, that's illegal for starters. So, but why would that stop anyone in this Tory government? Right?
No, well,
but also then you look at things like Syria.
I mean, obviously they wouldn't do it themselves.
People who wanted to fly out
that would require some self-sacrifice.
Well, people who wanted to fly out and fight against IS. Obviously, a lot of people, we're harsh on people that wanted to join IS.
Yeah.
But a lot of people wanted to fly out and fight against IS.
Yeah.
They were heavily punished.
Yeah.
But you also look at, the Ukrainian thing's really sad, but it does show a kind of, and I'm not trying to diminish or belittle it, but it does show a kind of a racist undertone in the world, because places like Palestine and Yemen, who have been facing the same shit for years,
and we've done absolutely nothing,
and just the world couldn't care less.
Do you think it's as simple as there's more white people in Ukraine than in places?
I think
like
it's not just a racial thing in terms of the colour of the skin. I think it's a religious thing as well.
Yeah, I think also the nuclear element with Russia has made it far more. It feels like with Russia, there's far bigger consequences at stake, I guess.
Like I said, all the reports that I've read suggest that this is a lose-lose situation for Putin. He will be ousted sooner or later because... Well,
that was a question I wanted to lead on to, I think, towards the end was...
What will happen in the long term?
Yeah, so, I think the way I was going to put it was... Do you see there being a peaceful resolution? And if there is, would that see the end of Putin? And if it did, what does that even mean?
The peaceful resolution thing as well, they keep saying, we want to have peace talks. And he's like, we want to do it in Minsk. And it's like, bro, Minsk is like fucking Belarus, your little puppet country, where half of the attack came from, by the way. It was
neutral, is it?
Belarus, Russia, Crimea. That's where the invasion was launched from. It's like, yeah, okay, mate.
Yeah, we'll go there.
Although they did agree, they did tentatively agree to special corridors where they would have a ceasefire and allow humanitarian aid in and out, but whether that happens or not. So, listen, I've been bounding through my notes. Was there anything,
No, to be honest, we've been
kind of thing.
Having a decent discussion and covering.
Did you want to read through them and see if there was anything?
Well, like I said, that was one of the things I wanted to talk about was, like, for me, even if, like I said, the miraculous happens and for whatever reason Putin's no longer in charge of Russia, I don't know if I believe that's suddenly a positive thing for Russia, because they're not going to suddenly turn on their head and go to a democratic nation. And
but there's still a power vacuum. There's a power vacuum.
Well, yeah, and that power vacuum is going to create chaos where people are going to get killed, and then we're just going to end up very likely with someone like Putin back in charge of Russia, but just different.
Sort of like a real-world scary version of the film, the Armando Iannucci film. Have you ever seen The Death of Stalin?
No, I haven't. I've heard good things.
But yeah, basically, Stalin dies and suddenly all his little cohorts around him are like, smiling to each other's faces while plotting their demise. Is like, that throne is mine.
Yeah.
And I'll be fucked if it's like, I'm going to take my little section, the military, the KGB,
none of those oligarchs, and the oligarchs are the people after Putin that hold any semblance of power. They're not going to go, well, should we start handing the power and the money back to the people? Are we fuck? Do you know what I mean? They're just...
Listen, there's some... As well as where we're sanctioning, just a few stats and figures, by the way.
Yeah.
Ukraine formed at the fall of the
Soviet Union.
They were formed in 1991.
Year of my birth.
But that was just a random fact I wanted to get in there because I looked it up and I was like, I'll be fucked if I've looked this fact up and I'm not going to get it into the fucking pod. But the thing I wanted to look up, so the EU have all agreed to ban Russian banks from using SWIFT, which is the world software for sharing money, for exchanging money. So they're having a real time. The ruble's fallen below the dollar for the first time like fucking ever. It's really, really shit.
Well, it's funny. I saw a graph this morning that basically since Putin's been in charge, the Russian economy's just steadily gone downhill.
And the thing that is, and I know, and every time it does, they get a little bit worried. People start to think maybe Putin isn't the guy. He goes and starts a war. But one of the things, so we're putting those. There's a huge rush in Russia for people to get their money out the bank because they're like, fuck having it in the banks. The bank's being sanctioned. I want my hard cash. I want that.
Yeah.
The Russian banks do not have the reserves to fulfill that need. So there's a worry about that. But it works both ways. I looked it up that I've got the stat here because what is Crossing Swords without
with a few stats?
Without a pointless stat. Down here, Russia and Ukraine account for 60% of global sunflower oil production.
Russia does.
Between Russia and Ukraine, Ukraine is number 1.
Right.
Russia is number 2 in the
Are
world.
we heavily reliant on sunflower oil?
It's used a lot.
Really?
It's used an awful lot.
I mean, we use it at home, but I wouldn't have known it was that.
I know. I mean, we
thing.
use it in like cooking and stuff, but it's used as part of the production process for an awful lot of things.
I didn't know that. Fair enough.
And it's that,
Well, one of the last things I wanted to talk about was obviously one of the other reasons we wanted to retouch on this was you said you'd changed your opinion on how we should approach the situation. And obviously we haven't talked about that at all. So I don't actually know what you've actually changed your mind on and how you're feeling at the moment. So do you want to talk to us about that?
Sure. For me now, I support full military support to those in Ukraine.
What level does that go to?
I wouldn't go as far as, let's say, like start conscripting people in and getting people in, but definitely those in active military service
should be deployed. Let's
get troops on the ground. Let's get fighters in the air because, we talk about, like this government more than anyone talks about being Churchillian and whatever. Yeah. This is literally what Churchill was faced with. There is a country invading another country after being told by everyone else,
you shouldn't be doing that.
Don't do that. And now here we are, right? So we're now in a position where we're in that, and also then it's like, if he's allowed to get away with this, what's next?
Yeah.
How far does he take it then?
Yeah.
It's like, no, we've got to full in. And, Finland and Sweden, by the way, both of whom are neutral, particularly Finland has been famously neutral for a long time, and we've actually covered a little bit of that, and we've covered Hurto Risti in our Unsung Heroes episode of the pod, which you can go back and find.
The lawyer that became Prime Minister?
Yep. And he essentially sacrificed himself for the sake of his country.
Yeah.
And literally he said, they better not join NATO either, or they'll be held to pay. The world will see consequences that's never
Finland
seen before.
Fuck you.
And both Finland and Sweden were like, they were never going to join.
Yeah.
By the way, they were never looking to join, and they're still probably not going to join.
No.
But because of that, they're like, neutral. Fuck this guy's made. Against the guy that's just made a threat on us, like a nuclear level threat.
Yeah.
Nah, fuck that guy's a prick.
I don't think it's weird. My mum keeps coming to me because she knows I sort of keep up to date with stuff, and she's like, how worried should I be? And I was like, to be honest with you, I wouldn't be that worried. We're not even currently on any sort of war footing whatsoever. We're not readying troops. We're sending weapons and supplies to the Ukrainians, but that's about it. Like, in truth, the likelihood of it escalating as it stands is very low.
Yeah, but also I know I talked about, where do they stop, what goes next, but also from a humanitarian point, people are dying.
Yeah.
Like,
it is that
Russians
simple.
are literally targeting civilians.
It is that simple.
And they're doing it strategically. They took out, there was the bomb at the TV antenna the other day where they wanted to cut communications.
The thing is, for me, there's no way of invading a country and trying to see cities without killing civilians.
No, but they've been attacking hospitals, apartment complexes, all this kind of stuff, and it's like
completely unnecessary.
Like, people are dying. We have to get out there and help them.
Yeah.
And also, there's rumours that the military reserves, the supplies in Ukraine would only last 10 days of fighting.
Okay.
So when at the point of this podcast going out, I think that's coming on to about day 8, day 9. And I know we're sending stuff.
Yeah.
If we're sending stuff from sort of like Poland and that in the West, if Russia managed to take much more, there's
Yeah.
going to be fewer and fewer routes for us to even get stuff into there. And
To-
also the thing,
To be honest, I think the moment's passed. I mean, unless the Russians do something truly horrific, like drop a bomb on a part of, like, I mean, like maybe to a heavier degree than they have, if they just start shelling and committing genocide, then I think that'd be the only way we would step things up. I currently can't see us under any circumstances deploying
no, I
troops.
can't see it either, but I think they are committing genocide, and I think it's just
Yeah,
we have to take that stance.
yeah, no, I mean, I couldn't agree more.
And I know you said it before, you were already on board with that.
Yeah, I mean, I like when I'm on Twitter at the moment, I'm constantly like scrolling past stuff because I watched a video of like dads saying goodbye to their children, going off to fight, and it breaks my heart, and it's just awful. And you just think there, but for the grace of God, and I feel every day we don't do more to help them, it's more of a stain on us, and especially for us, and because we grew up on stories of like borderline like glorious tales of defeating Hitler, and you know why we did that, and that it was to stand up for what was right, and that we were willing to fight to the last.
It baffles me that these people live off that embodiment.
But yet we get to these moments where someone who is equally as evil as Hitler, he might not have committed the same level of atrocities, but stands for the same beliefs that him and his people are superior to everyone else, and what they want is what they want, and they're going to do it. And I feel like we have, like, and it is banged into us from near enough we're old enough to read how amazing Britain is, and that, you know, we defeated Hitler and the Nazis, and
the rhetoric is we do it again, but here we are not doing it again.
Exactly. And for me, it's like spits in the face of everything we say we stand for, and you know, we talk about every year remembering the dead and, you know, respecting their memory. Well, not standing up to people like Putin is the complete antithesis to that.
Yeah,
it's the complete opposite, and it's shameful.
And I might be about to undermine your point, but
no, you have to turn it up. Thank you.
It's a well said point, and it's an interesting. I mean, Jesus, I just lost my train of thought trying to do that.
And I'm
by
not a
fucking
massively patriotic person, but I just find, like, for me, like you mentioned stuff like Yemen, it disgusts me what's going on there. And I mean, that's an incredible regime of propaganda that Israel have somehow managed to wrangle it, that they can do whatever the fuck they like, and you say a word.
I know, and the thing
them
about the
and
whole
it's
Palestinian thing as well is that it's literally, it was us that fucked it up in the first place.
Yeah.
But,
yeah,
no, you know, not to get into that, I think...
No.
I mean, there's so many horrors going on right now, and like I said, I just stand against them, and I fully support military support.
I just, you know, I'm not a religious man, but, you know, you say this in these situations, I pray to God that less people die and we get a resolution as quickly as possible.
Yeah, and I just want to quickly go through, just make sure I've covered as much as I wanted to cover. Yeah. Full support to the UN. Interestingly, 5 is a really interesting number here, but 141 to 5 in a vote to condemn and insist Russian troops are removed. The 5 that didn't, that's an interesting one.
Yeah.
When Lavrov stepped up to talk, the Russian representative at the UN, 140 representatives walked out and started and I think that's a really powerful
That's
move.
the sort of pettiness I can get behind.
Yeah, 100%. There were reports of Russian soldiers on Tinder, but being catfished for intelligence by Ukrainian soldiers.
Nice.
Which again, that's like proper 21st century.
That's brilliant, actually.
Warfare.
Just before we continue, did you see what Anonymous have asked people to do? To leave reviews on Russian restaurants and businesses on TripAdvisor, because the people they're looking for access to information and leave information of what's going on in there.
Well, Anonymous supposedly did take down some Russian websites. They took over state TV for a short while to display images of the war, like actual images of the war, what's going on. Earlier when I said that Russian captives, by the way, were being offered to call their mum, that wasn't true. What's happened is Ukraine have set up a hotline for Russian parents to call and check the status of their children.
Okay.
But it's the same sentiment as far as I'm.
Yeah.
And yeah, the Russian tanks and convoy being stranded, running out of food and running out of food supplies, that to us suggests, like you said, that he thought it was going to be over a lot quicker.
Yeah. Did you see that picture that was carrying around?
Just before you go, the one thing that the thought that was bouncing around in my head that escaped me before I fucked up the applause is that the guy who invented the term, you know, the idea that on the internet, someone at some point will compare someone to Hitler, and at that point they've lost the argument as soon as you make the comparison, because obviously they're not Hitler. That's a ridiculous thing to say.
Yeah.
Even he came out this week and said
no, in this case it's fair.
Yeah, it's all gone out the window. In this case,
well, there you go. It's been verified.
But the picture, sorry.
Yes, it's just a funny thing of a Ukrainian man in cycling gear on his bike cycling down the road, and there's tanks crossing.
Yes.
And like someone posted it and was like, you know, look at this guy just casually cycling down the street with tanks rolling, and then someone just commented underneath saying, "Fucking cyclists, even during a war,
they think they own the road." I said,
and I was just like,
"Yeah, no, I saw that."
Go on.
No, and it's real. Like right now, I know we mentioned the whole like Churchillian thing. Like right now, that's what Ukraine is. That's what Zelensky's doing.
Yeah,
he's
smashing it.
And also, he's they, you know, it's all these little moments of fucking stand up and fucking, you know, they took all the road signs down so that the Russian troops couldn't find their way easily to the key cities. And then they put them back up.
Yeah. And
every direction was, it all said
the wrong way
to the Hague. All to the Hague, which is the International Criminal Court.
Love it.
In the Hague, for those that don't
Love
know.
it.
So
that's clever. Yeah,
it's a real moment
sort of
human
pettiness. I can get behind.
It's like, do you know what? I might not be able to grab a gun and fight, but I can be petty as shit.
I can fuck their shit up.
That's how I fight.
I can fuck their shit up. Yeah.
We stand with Ukraine, I think, is the overriding message.
Undoubtedly. My thoughts just go out to them. I hope as many fathers get to go home to their children as possible. I hope as many civilians as is possible get to safety.
Over 1 million now, 1 million refugees having fled.
I mean, it's mad. It's huge what's going on at the moment, and I think people are going to look back on this period and judge us quite poorly, sadly, because I don't think we're doing enough. No.
And that's the thing, it's as if the world hasn't been shit enough for the last 2 years.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. Do you think that had a thing? Because there's a lot of reports that the isolation and the lockdown kind of amplified Putin's paranoia. I mean, you see him sitting like a fucking mile and a half away from his generals, like he's worried they're going to poison him.
Do you think Putin
Which they
was
should, by
locked up in his dacha during COVID? Fuck no, that guy was doing whatever the fuck he wanted.
I'm just saying.
Do you know
I'm throwing it out there.
That man has not got fucking COVID depression. Do you know what I mean? That's not. No.
There's no term for what he's got. No. It goes beyond.
That guy was licking door handles. He was doing whatever the fuck he wanted. Do you know what I mean?
Licking everyone else's door handles.
Yeah, he was fucking whoever he wanted. You know, guarantee that man's got a harem of ever revolving women
and men.
Yeah, why not?
Who cares?
One of the most powerful men in the world. Why not?
Most of the most powerful men in the world historically have been gay, or had gay sex. Not even been gay, but had gay sex.
Yeah. And I bet he never received.
We should do that. We should do an. I realize this is a weird.
We should do what?
We should do gay sex.
Is this you propositioning me?
We should do gay sex between us on the pod. No, we should do an episode looking back at like historical leaders who have been in queer or queer people through.
Well, Alexander the Great, the most successful conqueror, arguably of all time, used to have men he shared his bed with.
Yeah, and that's that whole thing with Julius Caesar.
Hephaestion.
And
was Julius Caesar a bum? Oh, I nearly said something bad.
Was
he gay? I pulled that back.
He had a sexual relationship with a leader of another empire.
Oh, really?
But the people knew about it. They weren't bothered the fact that it was a gay. They bothered the fact that he was the one taken. They were like, a great Roman leader should be the one doing the fucking. Yeah, but
then back in those days, like if you drew a picture of Cleopatra taking a penis, you know, that was a killable offence. If you were caught doing that, you were like shaming the pharaoh. So.
Yeah, but anyway, we stand with Ukraine.
Yeah,
it's a weird way to circle
and
back
gay
around to
relationships.
But it's horrendous. There's no other way for it. No other word for it.
Absolutely. So yeah, to our brothers and sisters in Ukraine, we
Stand strong.
Stand strong, and you'll get through
Stand
it.
strong.
And
The world is with you.
It feels sort of bad to plug after that, so I think for once we'll skip that, and it will just come up on screen.
You'll see it if you're on.
And we will just end it by sending our love to all those affected out there.
Yeah.
And hope it's over soon.
We're with you.
Yeah. Goodbye.